Now, Kenyans go to the polls on Tuesday in elections that have been described as critical in the country's history. This is according to Executive Director for Amnesty International in Kenya, Rongo. Around 9 million registered voters will go to the polls to elect the country's fifth president. The electorate will also cast votes in the country's governors and parliament representatives. The economy, regional stability and political climate are just some of the issues that are at stake.
There are 70 election observer missions that have arrived in Nairobi over the last couple of days. So, you're literally right that there are a lot of eyes on Kenya at the moment. So what's at stake really is a couple of things. One is that, in comparatively to the region, Kenya has had a very open representative democracy with regular elections, and in many cases, although there have been disturbances and, elections are probably the most violent episodes in Kenyan history. We have seen regular elections and, two-term presidencies without much contestation since the end of the one-party state in 1991. But really what's at stake at this time is we have a very closely fought race between Raila Odinga and William Ruto, both of whom have been in government for several years. The last one really is that, for many Kenyans, this is probably a critical moment in terms of the choice that they'll make. The two big political parties, there are 4 presidential candidates, but the two big political candidates are essentially have framed themselves ideologically, and there are clear choices that Kenyans have to make come Tuesday.
Right, to further unpack these coming elections, I'm joined by Fredrick Ogenga, Associate Professor of Media and Security Studies and Director of the Center for Media Democracy, Peace and Security at Rongo University in Kenya. Very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. The 2022 Kenyan election is said to be unique in many ways. I mean, it marks the first time since the Daniel Arap Moi era that neither an incumbent president nor a candidate from the country's largest ethnic community, being the Kikuyu, is a major contender for president. What are perhaps some of the other dynamics at play going into this election?
Well, going into these decisive elections, I think one more interesting thing or dynamic that is at play is the fact that the current sitting president is actually vying for presidency in a kind of like an interesting scenario where the sitting president Uhuru Kenyatta is backing up his former rival and leader of opposition Raila Odinga, and this came after they fell off having disagreed on principles, and therefore the president decided to back Odinga, and Odinga seems to be the front runner in these elections. But again, the deputy president comes from the Kalenjin community, which is a relatively populous community, second, I think, in Kenya, and is trying to garner votes really with his popularity that he capitalized on the Mount Kenya region around President Kenyatta's home turf. So it's very interesting to see how ethnic dynamics are at play, at the same time how these dynamics are overshadowed by coalitions which are formed beyond ethnic sentiments.
Yeah. I'd like for us to expand on the ethnicity part of this conversation a little later on, and perhaps come to this point as one commentator has argued that while the cards seem to be stacked against Vice President William Ruto, it would be foolish to write him off. What's your take?
Oh, well, it will be foolish to write him off because Ruto has been there for a while. He's been campaigning for as far as we know, and he has got a serious, solid background of following, predominantly in his Mount Kenya, in his Rift Valley backyard. He was in Gishu, places like Kericho County, and others, and he enjoys popularity in Uhuru Kenyatta's Mount Kenya region. But again, he's squaring it off with somebody who also enjoys popularity across the country. And recent opinion polls have it that Raila is leading in 6 out of 9 counties that are going to be the decisive counties in determining who's going to be the next president. So it's going to be a tight race, and anything is possible. But as far as the front running is concerned, I think Raila Odinga still has an edge over Ruto based on the fact that there was a third entrant, Professor Wajakoyo, who came in and swayed youthful voters on the promise of legalizing marijuana and commercializing snake venom production and all these interesting, innovative ideas. And he swayed a number of youths, and this really has been Ruto's home turf, because Ruto is campaigning on the ticket of the hustler and the hustler narrative. So he managed to carve these elections based on the dynasties and the hustler, calling Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga as descendants of the dynasty since the 60s. And him from the humble beginnings, therefore his policy has been anchored on bottom-up approach, but is supposed to support the common man. So he lost a little bit of his support base. We won't argue that this support base went to Odinga, but that's what Odinga's campaign needed. Ruto, remember, needs 100% voter turnout in Mount Kenya. He needs 100% voter countdown in his home turf passing issue, and the rest he can pick from elsewhere. But so right now, if you deny him a chance, if you just take 10%, 20% out of Mount Kenya and which indeed there's a new campaign some are managed to do, then it presents to understand how Ruto could be possibly the winner of the forthcoming elections.
Yeah, I mean, those are quite important elements that you make mention of there, the ethnicity part of it, as you touched on it a little earlier as well. Kenya's ethnic arithmetic and the youth bulge have really been cited as the pressing challenges that will need stern leadership, more especially as the ethnicity part of it remains a main driver of the voting preferences in Kenya. What should political aspirants be saying? I mean, what sort of language? I mean, you've made mention of the hustler part of it, which speaks to young people, attractive in that space. But what will it take to sway large groups?
I think that question has already been answered by Political Parties Act Amendment Bill, which actually came in very strongly to sanction the modus operandi of Kenyan politicians, who are usually most of the time regarded as political prostitutes. They jump from one party to another a day or even hours before the elections. And this has presented a lot of problems. So in this kind of a scenario, we witnessed a situation where a particular political leader had a particular ethnic following. But since the Political Parties Act was amended, it was passed in Parliament, it really curtailed that kind of movement where, because this bill talked about funding political parties, campaigns, and when coalitions should be formed, by what time should people reorganize themselves, and so on. So politicians in Kenya are caught flat-footed because in Kenya, you can't really win election with one ethnic bloc. It has to be a coalition. And the sanity that was brought by this bill allowed people to reorganize themselves early, having the understanding that one single ethnic bloc cannot win votes. So we ended up with coalitions that are rather not ethnic. Could be that these coalitions now, as we witnessed, were informed by ideologies. And these ideologies dwelt on what you actually just mentioned, the hustler narrative. So people are talking about what you can do for Kenyans, what can you do for the youth, how can you support the youth so that they can get opportunities and employment, educate them, and so on, and all these challenges. In fact, the elephant in the room bringing down cost of living, the price of unga, maize meal went so high, courtesy of so many things, the Ukrainian war and others, COVID. So the youth were really on the receiving end. And the youth would want to hear somebody who is there to give them solutions to the kind of problems that they are facing. So the hustler versus dynasty kind of approach to these elections, or the question of the economic liberation of predominant youths in Kenya and women, became the big question. And those who had actually a message that is supposed to be coined around this thing are really having a lot of following from youthful voters. So we see coalitions, the One Kenya coalition on one side and the Kenya Kwanza coalition on the other side, all hell-bent to convince the youth on how they can do something for them economically to empower them. So we are seeing coalitions having multiple ethnic followings, especially basically from the leadership of those coalitions, because they had to go and get like-minded people to form those coalitions ahead of the deadline that was really put in place by the political parties amended bill that I just talked about.
Yeah.
So we are kind of like moving beyond ethnic allegiances in terms of defining the political narrative to issue-based politics based on what is really the elephant in the room that people should look at. And the elephant in the room, we just mentioned it, is the youth bulge, is unemployed youth, is high cost of living, is unemployment, and lack of opportunities. So those who speak to these things, and apparently both sides are speaking about these things, are the ones who are going to get the following. So the question is, to what extent would one side be innovative so that they can get an edge over the other? And this will be evidenced on the 9th of August when Kenyans go to vote. We remember a majority of youth are voters, really, but you still have a good number, a sizable number of older Kenyans with a large commanding number when it comes to who will decide on who becomes the winner in the coming election.
Thank you so much, Professor Fredrick Ogenga, speaking to us there about the elections in Kenya taking place on the 9th of August. We leave it there for now, and thank you for your time.